Hello, and welcome to my book review of While Justice Sleeps by Stacey Abrams. This is the first novel Stacey Abrams wrote that wasn't like a romance novel, and the first novel she wrote under her own name instead of her pen name. I would classify it as a political suspense thriller. While Justice Sleeps, it's about 363 pages. So it's not that long of a read. But it's basically the main character. Her name is Avery Keene. She's a law clerk for a Supreme Court justice. But so basically everyone in this book is fictitious. There's no actual politicians who show up who are actually politicians in real life. All the characters are Stacey Abrams' creations. Yeah, okay, that sounds good. We'll go with that. But like I said, the main character is Avery Keene. She's a law clerk for Supreme Court Justice Howard Wynn. And it starts off with the first chapter, introduces Justice Howard Wynn. And to be honest, I felt the first chapter kind of made me not want to read the book. The first chapter makes Justice Howard Wynn seem like a real jerk. So it didn't really make me want to read more. But then you start reading it, and then I started reading it, and I kind of forced myself to read it, but then at a certain point, I thought, well, it'll be interesting to see how this ends up, So I guess it's okay, but to start off with, it really didn't catch my interest compared to some books, usually that I want to read from the beginning to the end. But I didn't give up on reading While Justice Sleeps, and the name comes from the fact that after the first chapter, Supreme Court Justice Howard Wynn goes into a coma after supposedly ODing on some meds, right? And so now he's in a coma, and hence the name While Justice Sleeps, because Justice Howard Wynn is in a coma sleeping. Okay. That's where Stacey Abrams gets the name, the title of the book. So basically after that, it turns out that Justice Wynn, that his power of attorney goes over to his law clerk, Avery Keene. And so then Avery Keene has to figure out what to do with, her power of guardianship over the justice. And it ends up being like Justice Wynn set up a bunch of different puzzles, a bunch of different riddles for her to figure out and find information that he hid away, in order to figure out what's going on, because it's like a big conspiracy is occurring, and Avery Keene has to figure it out, and then eventually she gets help from her roommate who's a doctor, and Justice Wynn's lawyer, and then Justice Wynn's son, Jared Wynn, who was former military and worked in intelligence, and so he's like hacking computers and stuff like that in the book. And then of course they made it, Stacey Abrams wrote it, so it was like there was a budding romantic relationship between the main character Avery Keene and Jared Wynn. So it was like the Justice Wynn, the dad's riddles and mystery led them to each other. But I guess that's a brief overview. Now to go into the spoilers. Basically, it turns out that Justice Wynn was an avid chess player. Okay, that's not a spoiler. But he was an avid chess player, and he was playing chess online with this Dr. Ani Ramji, who was a doctor in India who worked at this Hygeia, I think was the company he worked at, and they were doing these top secret experiments that and the goal of the experiments was to produce a virus that would attack people with certain genes in their DNA. And so the U.S. government was funding them covertly, and so basically Avery Keene had to find the evidence and prove that the United States government had funded secret experiments in India to try and make biogenetic weapons. That was basically the plot, right? And of course she figured out all the stupid clues and vague clues because she was supposed to be this brilliant law clerk, and basically the president was even behind it and had given permission to this guy named Major Vance, who was from the Department of Homeland Security, and he became like the main adversary basically, and they went, they tried to kill Avery Keene, they tried to arrest her, they tried to kidnap her mom to try and get what they wanted. But Avery Keene was able to persevere and turn the tables on to the government itself. And she ended up going to the Supreme Court for a case about Howard Wynn's legal guardianship, basically, but it didn't make any sense because I'm pretty sure in real life it would have took longer than like a week to get the case to the Supreme Court. But supposedly none of the other courts wanted to mess with it because it had to do with the Supreme Court, and they were worried about their political futures. So it went to the Supreme Court, and then at the Supreme Court, everyone's expecting her to go up in flames, but then she reveals all that she knows in front of the whole world, and reporters watching, writing down so everyone knows. And it comes out that, that even the president probably knew about it. And so then after that, Major Vance, that's one thing I didn't like about the book. It seemed like Avery Keene was always being grabbed or getting hit in the head or something, or some person was doing something to her physically. I didn't like that. I don't know. But at the end of it, it was like the Major Vance dude came into this office in the Supreme Court, and they were still looking for him, because he was wanted, for his role in this conspiracy. And he comes in there, and then he was telling Avery Keene, like, oh, well, this is evidence that you can use to get President Stokes, in trouble more, because it turned out that President Stokes had killed he was a vice president. It was Vice President Stokes, and then he became president, and he had killed the president before him to become president. So, and then he put something over her mouth, to make her pass out, and then he disappeared. I don't know. It was just really weird. That part was weird at the end. So the book ended with presumably President Stokes going to be impeached and possibly, I don't know, something happened, but you know how it is. And then Justice Wynn was still in a coma, but they probably were going to be able to figure out a way to get him out of the coma with this, whatchamacallit, a potential drug to the drug that he took to put him in a coma. But, and then Avery Keene was probably going to go on and become a lawyer like she wanted to, and Major Vance was MIA, missing in action. He was nowhere to be found. He got away. And so that's how it ended. But in the acknowledgments or something, Stacey Abrams wrote something saying that it was Avery Keene's debut, so it sounded like she wanted to make a series out of this character, using this character. I don't know if I'd read the sequel. I didn't think it was that great. I would say if you thought this sounded interesting, it would be worth a library rental. But I personally felt like I didn't like the book. There was a couple things I didn't like about it, and I just didn't like it. Yeah, overall, I probably didn't care much for it. But I mean, it's not badly written, It's just that it just didn't hold my interest, I guess, as much as some books do. So, I mean, it's completely up to you, If it sounds like it sounds interesting to you, go ahead and read it. But personally, I felt like it's definitely not worth buying. I would say it was worth a library checkout and give it a try. But like I said, I felt like it started pretty... the start was pretty rough. I felt like it could have been maybe executed a little better to make it more interesting and draw the reader in sooner rather than later. But that's just my opinion. I hope you give it a read and create your own opinion about it. Stacey Abrams, While Justice Sleeps.